Alright guys, here we go. We have our Unit 1, Subunit 7, COSO Enterprise Risk Management Framework. Today is 6th of December 2018 and COSO has been in your syllabus, this new model, for the last 1 year, and it has not yet been tested so far. Not even a single MCQ, nothing in the essay type. But it doesn't mean you won't be tested on it in the coming attempt in Jan-Feb 2019. So let us do it in detail. Question number 1, and one thing that you must keep it in mind: all these MCQs that we are going to do today, all of them have been extracted from Glime's theory. None of these questions is from the past papers because this topic has not yet been tested. So the quality of the question is not good. In fact, all of these are just the reflection of the theory of COSO risk management. So according to COSO, which component of the enterprise risk management addresses an entity's operating structures and core values? Operating structure and core values. So those of you who have read the theory well, they will know exactly that this has been taken from here. Core values and operating structure. Let me give you an overview of the COSO framework so that you have a better idea. COSO model can be represented this way. This is COSO framework. There are two supporting aspects: governance and culture, and information and communication. These two, they are called the supporting aspects of COSO framework. And there are three core processes, common processes: strategy and objective setting, performance, and revision and review. So in total there are 5 components of COSO framework, and each of these components have further principles. So basically there are total 5 components of COSO framework, 5 components, and there are 20 principles. 5 components and 20 principles. So the COSO framework consists of 5 interrelated components. 2 of them are called supporting aspect components: governance and culture, information, communication, reporting. And the other 3 are the common processes. And there are total 20 principles which are distributed among these components. And what are these 20 principles? Here they are. These given in green are the 20 principles. So the question required, let's go back to the question. So which of these components, 5 components, which of these among the 5 components addresses an entity's operating structures and core values? Operating structures and core values. So if you go to, these are the 20 principles, and these are your 5 components: governance and culture, strategy and objective, performance, review and revision. So what you are looking for? See, oversight, operating structures, culture and core values. So the principle of culture and core values, it is in the component governance and culture. So that's what you need to be referring again and again: governance and culture. Next question. A manufacturing firm identified that it would have difficulty sourcing raw materials locally. We will have problems in getting materials locally. So it decided to relocate its production facilities somewhere where the raw material availability is not a problem. So what actually you have done? According to COSO, this decision represents which of the following responses? If you remember, we have 5 responses to risk, namely, either you avoid, you do not do that activity at all. Either you avoid, you accept the risk, you reduce the risk, sometimes called the risk mitigation, reduce or mitigate. Sometimes you share or transfer with your banker, insurance company, or your customer or your vendor, any party with which you are in a contract. So you can share the risk between 2 of you. And then finally, the fifth response is exploit. Deliberately look for the projects that are risky, because high risk means more return. So you have relocated your production facilities to a new place. So which of these responses do you think it's? There is no risk sharing. We don't see any vendor or customer or a banker or an insurance company. There is no risk acceptance. Risk acceptance means staying there. Risk acceptance means staying right there where there's material shortage. Prospect theory, we haven't read anything like this. But what it is, prospect theory, basically it's studied in cognitive psychology, where a person selects an option, and those options do not have clear-cut probabilities of occurrence. The probabilities are indeterminate, but still you are using probabilities to select an option. This is clearly not a part of your CMA syllabus. Cognitive means complex mental processes. So this is clearly not the area of our discussion. So yes, it is risk reduction. You have relocated your production facility to a place where the raw material availability is not an issue. So which means risk reduction is the right option. Risk reduction is the same as risk mitigation. So the correct option is A. Okay, next question. Each of the following is a limitation of enterprise risk management. Each of these is a limitation, a drawback, or a limitation of ERM, except, mind the word, this is what you call the question twister. Changes the dynamic of the question altogether. So which of these is in fact not a limit? Each of the following is a limitation, except. So let us first find the limitations. There will be three limitations, and one of these is not a limitation, and that is our right answer. So let us see. ERM deals with risk which relates to the future and inherently uncertain. You are trying to predict the future, and future is uncertain. So you are trying to quantify uncertainty, which is practically not possible. This is a limitation. It is a limitation. It is a limitation. Only the God above knows what is going to happen. He is Akle-Kul. He knows what will happen. We are just trying to use our statistical model to predict the future, and future is always indeterminate. So this is a limitation of COSO model. Second, ERM operates at different levels with respect to different objectives. Organizations can have different objectives, and each of the organization levels operates in accordance with different levels, that objectives that have been set by the organization. That's a confusion also, because organization doesn't have a single set of objective. We need profitability, reliable financial reporting, efficient and effective operations. So all these objectives have to be pursued at different levels. This makes ERM very complex, hard to manage. This is a limitation. It is a limitation. You're trying to manage so many things at the same time. It is hard. It's a limitation. ERM can provide absolute assurance with respect to objective categories. This is an impossibility. It is not a limitation. It is practically impossible. ERM does not, no risk management system provides an absolute assurance. This is impractical. This is impossible. It's basically not a limitation. It's impracticality. ERM is as effective as the people responsible for its functioning. ERM definitely will have certain limits, and those limits are in fact the reflection of the limitation of human beings. The ERM is as good as the people who have applied it. It's going to be as bad as the people who have set it up. So the ERM itself is not something that has come from the God above. It has been set by the people. It is good if the implementation has been done by professional people. It will be bad if it has been done by the people who are not professionally competent. So this is a limitation as well, because ERM is not a standard model that every organization and every setup can be implemented. It's a limitation as well. It means the correct option is C. Question number 4. According to COSO, The benefits of enterprise risk management include all of the following except. First of all, if you remember, we studied COSO, internal control framework, in our part 1. COSO does not have the force of law. COSO is a private sector entity made by some professional institution like American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, like Institute of Internal Auditors, IMA, Institute of Management Accountants, some industrialists. So they just provide you the thought leadership. Whatever they are telling you in internal control framework as well as enterprise risk management, they are just for the guidance. It's not law. COSO's pronouncements are not pieces of legislature. They do not have the force of law. So, and they must be studied as such. So according to COSO, the benefits of enterprise risk management include all of the following except. Those organizations who employ COSO risk management system, they will see decreased performance variability. ERM stabilizes business operations. Surprises will be reduced. Variability in your performance will be decreased. This is a benefit. This is a benefit. We are looking for something that is not a benefit. Improved resource allocation. ERM tells you where you need to put the food. You put your food where your mouth is. Mean you are allocating your resources in an effective manner. This is a benefit. Your assets deployment, your resource allocation is better. D. Improved risk identification and management. ERM helps you identify risks and manage them effectively. It's a benefit. But ERM does not eliminate all risks. That is practically impossible. No risk management system can eliminate all risks. Still some risks remains. Not all risk can be eliminated. The risk that remains even after all the responses have been taken is called the residual risk. The risk that stays with you even you have taken all the necessary steps, all these responses possible within the cost benefit scenario. The risk that stays with you is called the residual risk. So not all risks can be eliminated. So this is practically impossible. That's why B is the right answer. Moving on to the next question, number 5. Management considers risk appetite for all of the following reasons except. What is risk appetite? Risk appetite is the willingness of the management to take risk. How much risk management is willing to take is called risk appetite. This risk appetite is determined by the age of the organization, type of business, organizational culture, etc., etc. So as agreed, risk appetite means the risk management is willing to accept. Willingness to take risk is called risk appetite. So it says the management considers risk appetite for all of the following reasons except aligning with the development of strategies. When the strategies are being developed, risk appetite is considered. In this case, it is considered. When developing strategies, how much risk you are willing to take, that has to be considered for strategy development. Aligning with the business objective. Whatever strategy you have selected, in order to align with the business objectives, how much risk you are willing to take must be considered. Implementing of risk responses. We have 5 risk responses. Which of these risk response we will select also depends upon our risk appetite. If we are daring, we are risk seeking, it means our risk appetite is higher, so we will accept risk. Risk acceptance, also called self-insurance. If our risk appetite is low, it means we are risk averse. In that case, our response would be dafa karo, which you call risk avoidance. So it means which response you're going to take is determined by your risk appetite. So definitely it is considered. Risk appetite is considered in ABC. But setting of risk capacity. Risk appetite is the business ability, business willingness to accept risk. Business willingness to accept risk. I have $1 million in my bank account. I wish. And I am just willing to put my $1,500 in some risky transaction. This is my risk appetite because I'm willing to take $1,500. This is what I'm going to accept. But my risk capacity is $1 million. Risk appetite does not determine your risk capacity. Risk capacity determines your risk appetite. So saying that management considers risk appetite for setting risk capacity is already there. 1 million is in my bank account. ये risk capacity कि जेब में पैसा कितना है, this determines कि आप कितनी बड़ी छलांग मार सकते हो. Right? Risk appetite doesn't determine how much money you have in your pockets. This is the incorrect statement. This is wrong. That's the reason it's the right answer. Moving on to question number 6. Which of the following components are supporting aspects of COSO ERM framework? Supporting aspects. Let us go back to the overall ERM composition and I will show you from there. So as per these 5 interrelated components, governance, culture, information and communication, these are called supporting aspect components. They support the enterprise risk management. These are supporting aspects of ERM. Governance and culture, information, communication, reporting. Then there are 3 common processes. Common processes components are strategy and objective setting, performance and review and revision. Now let us go back to the question and see what exactly is needed. Which of the following components are supporting aspects of COSO ERM? So we just have to look at the supporting. Yes. Not A. Governance and culture is there, but review and revision is in common processes. So this is not true. Performance and review, these are common processes components. Governance, culture, information, communication and reporting. Technically, governance and culture is the first component and information, communication and reporting is the second component. So as I've told you, these are not exam standard questions because none of the questions has yet been tested on your Part 2 CMA exam at Prometric, but it will be in the coming months or coming year. So these questions have been extracted entirely from Glime's own book. Next question, question number 7. The components of enterprise risk management should be present and functioning. Components of enterprise risk management, those 5 components, 2 supporting, 3 common processes components. Those components must not only be present and they must also be working. They must also be present and functioning. When we say the word present, what does it mean? The word present, what does it mean? We won't look at the MCQs. We will go to the source from where this question has been taken. Assessing how effective is your enterprise risk management, the component principles and supporting controls are present. When they are present, when the component principles controls exist in design and implementation of ERM, their presence, how do we verify that they exist, they are present? Present means the components, there are 5 components, 2 support, 3 common processes, 5 components, and there are total 20 principles. 5 components, 20 principles. So present means the components and principles and controls exist in design and implementation. This is what you mean by the word present. Next is functioning. What do we mean by functioning? They are actually working. Functioning means the component, principles, controls continue to work. So when we say they are present, it means they exist in design and implementation. That's what the question asks for. The components exist in design. The components exist in implementation. That is, they exist. They are present. Components continue to operate to achieve strategy and business objective. This is functioning. So it means when we say the word present, the present will cover only 1 and 2, and that's the reason C is the right answer. Moving on to question number 8. Limitation of enterprise risk management may arise from all of the following except. Let us go back to the slides that contains limitations, and then we can discuss then and there. ERM has its limitations. Limitations of ERM result from the possibility of faulty human judgment. Why? Because ERM has been, the whole ERM setting process is a result of human judgment, the human effort. If there is faulty human judgment and effort, the ERM will fail. The cost benefit consideration. Sometimes we are very concerned about cost. We could implement good internal controls, but since they are costly, so we just avoid them. Since internal controls, risk management involve cost, in order to reduce cost, we might compromise on quality of controls. We might compromise on quality of risk management. So this cost benefit considerations might make your ERM fail. You want to save money, and in saving money you have not been able to effectively implement ERM. This is a limitation. Simple error and mistakes can always happen. Collusion. You have a good system of internal control, good ERM in place. You have segregated responsibilities of work, segregation of duties. What if these people are friends and they collude to commit a fraud? Collusion is a limitation of ERM. Management override of ERM practices. We have set certain policies and procedures. This is how the work should be done. The senior management, since they are the gods in an organization, so they can do anything they want. They can bypass the rules, they can bypass the procedures. This is called the management override. These are the limitations of ERM. So the question says, which of these is not a limitation? Faulty human judgment is a limitation. It is a limitation. Cost benefit consideration is a limitation. Collusion is a limitation. Failure to achieve objectives. This is not the result of ERM. ERM is not the reason, and note over it is also not listed. Whether a company achieves its objective or not, this is not the reason this is not the limitation of ERM itself. There are many other reasons that have led to the failure of achieving the objectives. Okay, moving on to question number 9. According to COSO, the component of enterprise risk management that best relates to continuous improvement. There are 5 components. 2 related to support and 3 related to common processes. So it says there is a component that relates to continuous improvement. We do not know it is in which component. There are 5 components and there are 20 principles to those components. So let us go back to the slide that contains those 5 components, 2 support and 3 common process, and there are 20 principles that radiate out of these 5 components. So let's go to the slide. Okay, here we go. See, these are the 5 components: governance and culture, strategic objective setting. These are your support, and performance review and info communication. Okay, if you just look at review and revision, continuous improvement is a principle that is within review and revision. So governance and culture, information communication and reporting, these uppermost and the lowest most are the support components. These mid 3, strategic objective setting, performance review and revision, these are your common processes components. So within review and revision we have continuous improvement. So we can simply click the option now. According to COSO, the component of ERM that best relates to continuous improvement is in review and revision, and that's the answer. Moving on. Next, question number 10. According to COSO, a risk profile is a view of relationship between what? Risk profile. For that we have to see what is the risk profile given in your COSO framework. Risk profile. Let us first see the risk profile and then we can select which option is correct. As I've told you, all these questions have been extracted from the Glime's textbook. So the questions are from Glime text straight away. So let us go to the slide and then I will show you where it relates. So basically risk profile is a graphical representation of risk and performance. It relates to variables risk and performance, which we discussed much more in detail in the theory of your COSO ERM. So risk profile shows a relationship between risk and performance. How are they related? It has been discussed. So let us just click the option that is the right one. According to COSO, a risk profile is a view, a graphical representation of the relationship between what? Risk and performance. Next, question number 11. Inherent risk. Inherent risk. What is inherent risk? Let me show you the picture of inherent risk. What he is doing is inherently risky. This is inherent risk. A risk that emerges from the nature of the business, from the nature of the objectives, from the type of business itself is inherent risk. Like for example, for a goldsmith business, a jewelry shop, if there is no gunman there, no security mechanism, the risk that is there just because of the type of the business is inherent risk. So we will have to take some steps to reduce the risk. We need to have a good security system, a guarded desk, a proper surveillance. So what is inherent risk? It is the risk of an activity that arises from the activity itself. Unless and until we take some steps to reduce the risk, this inherent risk can destroy the business. If this guy, what he's doing is inherently risky, we have to take some steps to save his life. Maybe there is a net. There is a wide net below this picture which we can't see. Maybe there is an ambulance standing by. If he falls, there is a immediate medical assistance. So if something that is inherently risky, we have to take some steps to reduce the inherent risk can be reduced. Inherent risk can be reduced by taking some mitigative steps. Still some risk remains. This is called the residual risk. That doesn't go away. So this is what you call the inherent risk, the risk that emerges or that stays because of the activity itself, and it can be reduced. Okay, going to the questions. So what is inherent risk? The risk after management takes action to alter its severity. No, not C. Please read the options again. Inherent risk, the risk when management has not taken action to reduce the impact or likelihood of an adverse event. We do not. The risk that is because of the nature of the business, you don't take any action. The risk that is because of the activity itself. A jewelry shop is inherently risky. What that guy was doing was inherently risky. You don't take any step. When you take some step, the inherent risk is reduced to a certain level. And that risk is called the residual risk. Right? So risk when management has not taken action, no guard, no surveillance, and you are running a jewelry shop. That's what you call the inherent risk. Moving on to MCQ number 12. Which risk response reflects a change from acceptance to sharing? From acceptance to sharing. Listen, it's a very good question. Which of these options shows a move from acceptance to sharing? An insurance policy, which basically was sharing. An insurance policy on a manufacturing plant was renewed. An insurance policy on a manufacturing plant was not renewed. So it was before it was sharing, now it is acceptance. Before we had shared the risk with the insurance company, and now we are not renewing the contract. That is my intention. I do not want to renew my insurance contract for my WagonR. So this is from sharing to acceptance. Okay, option B. Management purchased insurance on previously uninsured property. Management is now going for insurance on a property that was not insured before. So basically this is from acceptance to sharing. Previously you had accepted a risk, but now you want to take some cover. Acceptance to sharing. This is the right option. Let us see the others also. It's a good question. It's B. Let us see why not C. Management sold a manufacturing plant. Avoidance. Dafa karo. This is avoidance, risk avoidance. After employee stole numerous inventory items, management implemented mandatory background checks on all employees. Risk reduction. Originally it was risk acceptance. So let us see, okay, employees are taking company's goods, okay, fine. We pay them very little salary, thoda bahut chori kar le to guzara ho jayega unka. Maybe we were accepting the risk. Now we have implemented this policy to go for a background check about our employees, how good they are ethically. So it was from risk acceptance to risk mitigation, risk reduction. So it means the right option we already selected. Question number 13. Enterprise risk management, ERM. Let us read each option. ERM guarantees achievement of organizational objective. Diwane ka khwab. Implementing an ERM and hoping that we will achieve organizational objective, that's a stupidity. It's a false statement. It doesn't guarantee. Enterprise risk management requires establishment of risk and control activities by internal audit. Absolutely crap. Internal auditors does not draft, he does not design, he does not implement any internal control procedure, he does not draft, implement or design any ERM. He is not involved in any ownership of process. He is a watcher. He just watches, he reviews, he assesses, he evaluates, he determines. But he doesn't draft, he doesn't design, he doesn't implement. In other words, he doesn't take the management's role. So this is not the correct option. Internal auditors are not involved in operations. C. Enterprise risk management involves identification of events with negative impacts on organizational objective. Yes, ERM has many components and one of them identifies the events which can negatively or adversely affect an organization. That makes perfectly sense. Okay, moving on to the next question. At the last option also includes selection of best risk response for organization. ERM does not recommend any risk response. ERM does not tell you which risk to exploit, which risk to reduce, which risk to accept, which risk to share. It will only tell you how you can take these responses to maximize the shareholder value, to make your ERM effective. It won't recommend which of these is the best. You have to decide yourself. This is the incorrect option. Question number 14. According to COSO ERM framework, which view of risk is fully integrated? Which view is risk view is fully integrated? We have to go back to the slide and revisit these areas, and then we will be comfortably gliding through the options and select the right option. So how risk can be reduced? There can be 4 approaches. First is the minimal integration, where you have just the awareness of risk. These are the risks businesses are facing and this is how they are impacting our business, and you don't take any serious action to mitigate the risk. Next is the risk category view, limited integration. You identify and assess risk and you group them, how they affect your different functional and departmental activities. Risk profile view, partial integration. In this level, which is the third highest, risks are linked to business objectives they affect. Which risk affects which business? Financial risk affects which? Commodity risk affects which risk? And the last view, the portfolio, which is called full integration, it's a composite view, relates to the entity-wide strategy. The overall risk is being managed at an enterprise level. This is ERM, enterprise risk management. Risk management not for divisional level, not for an activity level or a process level. Risk is for the organization as a whole. So, according to COSO ERM framework, which view of risk is fully integrated? Risk portfolio view, A. Question number 15. An entity determined that its variable interest rate on borrowing will increase significantly in the near future. This is what has happened in Pakistan. State Bank has recently announced that the policy rate would go up by 150 basis point. 150 basis point means 1.5%. It means the previous rate was 8.5%. Now the policy rate is 10%. If you go to the bank for borrowing, since the policy rate is up, you may have to pay 15 or 17 or 18% interest on your loans. This is variable rate. There is another type of arrangement with the banker where you pay a fixed amount of interest no matter what the rate are currently prevalent in the market. So a company has a variable interest rate on borrowings, means the rate of interest varies. So you may have to pay more interest, or you may have to pay less interest if the interest rate fall. So an entity determined that its variable interest rate on borrowing will increase significantly in the near future as per the State Bank's policy. Consequently, the entity hedged its variable rate by locking in a fixed rate for the relevant period. So it's called interest rate swap. We will study this, it's part of your corporate finance. Swapping of your interest rate, fixed with variable. So according to COSO, this decision is which type of response to risk? Is it reduction? This is not acceptance. Acceptance means let the things the way they are. It is not acceptance. It is not acceptance. It is not avoidance as well. Avoidance means paying your loan altogether. So what basically you have done, you have shared your variable interest with a party that is paying a fixed interest. So basically you have, this is called interest rate swap. You will discuss this in detail in your corporate finance. So this is called interest rate swaps. Fixed interest rate has been swapped with the variable interest rate. So remember, when we use the word share, there is a second party involved, a banker, a customer or a supplier, or any party with whom you are sharing your interest payments. He will take on your variable interest payments and you will take on his fixed interest rate swap. So this is sharing. Reduction means you do something yourself by your own means to reduce the level of risk. Next, question number 16. An entity defines its risk appetite in which of the components of COSO ERM framework? There are 5 components, 2 support and 3 common processes. And in which of these components you define the risk appetite? Remember, 5 components, 20 principles. You have to learn them. It will be very easy for you to respond to the question like this. So an organization defines its risk appetite in strategy and objective setting. There are 2 support activities or support components, governance and culture, information and communication, and 3 common processes components. So within these common process components we have strategy and objective setting, within which we define the risk appetite, the willingness to take risk. This is different than risk capacity. Risk capacity is the ability to take risk. $1 million in the bank account, that is capacity. But I'm only willing to put $1,500 in a risky transaction, that's my risk appetite. So this is risk appetite, and that's the correct option in strategy and objective setting B. Question number 17. The underlying premise of the COSO, the founding assumption. Premise means assumption on basis of which you develop some understanding. The underlying premise of the COSO ERM framework is that every organization exists to. Let us go back to the framework we have discussed and we will find the answer then and there. So ERM is based on this assumption. The basic assumption of ERM is that every organization exists to provide value to its stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? Not the shareholders only. Stakeholders are the customers, suppliers, fund providers, employees, society at large, management, and shareholders, regulators, governmental agencies. So ERM is based on the premise that every organization exists to provide value for its shareholders. So that should be the answer. The underlying premise of the COSO framework is that every organization exists to provide value for its stakeholders, and that's the C, the correct option. Moving on to the next slide. According to the COSO model of ERM is best defined as, we haven't yet seen the definition of ERM. Let us do so. ERM. This is how we define ERM. ERM is a culture, capabilities and practices integrated with strategy setting and performance that organizations rely on to manage risk in creating, preserving and realizing value. This is the definition that we discussed in much more detail in our theory lecture. So this is how it is defined. Culture, capabilities, practices to manage risk in creating, preserving and realizing value for the stakeholders. Here it is. The culture, capabilities and practices that our organization rely on to manage risk in creating, preserving and realizing value. So if you knew the definition, you will simply click D. Moving on to the next question. A company management completes event identification. Event identification means those events that can adversely affect the business. So management completes event identification and assesses the severity of risk. Management then acts to alter the severity of risk. There is a risk of theft. There is a risk of theft. I can alter the severity by installing a closed circuit TV camera. Risk severity is altered. Maybe I appoint a staff member who watches all around for security purpose. So I have altered the severity of the risk. So this risk severity can be altered. So management can act to alter the severity of risk by taking some steps. According to the COSO model, which of the following types of risk does this situation represent? Inherent risk is the risk that is because of the type of business, the risk natural in a business activity. This is not inherent risk. Management has taken some steps to bring the risk down. When you take certain actions, the risk is reduced, and that risk that doesn't go away, residual risk. The risk that doesn't go away even if the management has taken some step to alter the severity, this is called the residual risk. Moving on to the next question. According to the COSO framework, an executive deliberate misrepresentation to a banker who is considering whether to make a loan to an enterprise is an example of which of the following internal control limitations. So basically, management has misrepresented to the banker in order to get the loan facility. So when the management bypasses the policies and procedures, this is called management override. This is not cost versus benefit. Controls are not breaking down. Control breakdown means control fail. Controls are working. You have bypassed the controls. You are so strong and powerful that you have bypassed the controls. This is management override. It is not collusion. Collusion means when group of employees, they collude to commit a fraud. There is no collusion. There is a single manager. So this is management override. B. 21. The performance component of COSO framework addresses what? Let us see the performance component, then we'll be able to answer this question. So this is the component performance, and these are the principles. 5 components, 20 principles. So in performance we have 4 principles: risk identification, risk severity, risk priority and risk responses. The 5 risk responses: avoid, accept, reduce, etc. So these are the elements in the component performance, and the question says the performance component of COSO framework addresses an entity's target and tolerance, no. Performance results and consideration of risk, risk identification, assessment and prioritization method. Let us cross check. Risk identification, risk severity, risk priority and risk responses. They are all there. That means C is the right option. 22. According to COSO, which of the following provides oversight of an entity's enterprise risk management process? So according to COSO, which of the following provides oversight of entity's enterprise risk management? The oversight of governance and risk management is the responsibility of the board of directors. It's C. Moving on to the next question, number 23. According to COSO, the difference between inherent risk and actual residual risk. Inherent risk is the risk is because of the nature of the business, and a residual risk is the risk remaining after you have taken certain actions, after your responses: avoid, accept, mitigate. So according to COSO, the difference between inherent risk and actual residual risk results because the management's action to alter the severity of inherent risk. When inherent risk severity is altered, the risk would reduce. Inherent risk will reduce, but it will not be totally eliminated. What remains is the actual residual risk. Action to alter the severity of actual residual risk is what remains after the action. It means A is the right answer, that when the management takes the action, the inherent risk is reduced and the new risk level is the actual residual risk, the risk that remains after the management has taken steps to reduce, avoid, accept, mitigate or share the risk. The 5 responses we have. Next, the internal auditor who works in ERM, internal auditor does not design, doesn't draft, doesn't implement any internal control, any ERM. He evaluates, he assesses, he determines. That's what he does. So, internal auditor may perform each of the following activities except: he will audit, yes he will. He will evaluate the design of the overall entity, yes. Evaluation, auditing, identify improved opportunities, yes. But he is not the one who will set the risk appetite. He is not the one who will design the risk management system, set the priorities. He is not the one to select the risk response. This is not his domain. This is the job of the management. This is the job of the management. Next, according to COSO ERM framework, which of the following is an essential element of governance and culture component? Governance and culture component. There are 2 support components and 3 common process components. So let us go back to the slide and see. Here we are. Oversight, operating structure, culture, core values, and attract suitable staff to the organization. So these are the 5 principles under the component governance and culture. So according to COSO framework, which of the following is an essential element of the governance and culture component? Human capital. Human capital. You attract competent human capital. That was the last point. Attract. Attract whom? The last point, attract whom? Competent personnel, HR. Next. According to COSO, the position of internal entity that is best suited as a part of enterprise risk management process to devise and execute risk procedures for a particular department. In other words, I've put it simply, if we have to construct the policies for purchasing department, who is the one who should draft the policy? Purchasing manager. If we have to set policies for treasury, who will be the one? CFO. It doesn't mean whatever he will write will be accepted as it is. It will be sent to this management for review. Management will add, will delete, will amend. Only then the policy becomes operational. Keep it in mind. That's what I have done myself. For financing department, in fact, I drafted the policy and that was submitted to the management. Management modified and then it was approved. So who is the one who will construct the policy, the internal control procedure? The departmental manager. Not the audit committee. They are not involved. They are at senior position. Not the chief executive officer, because we are talking about the departmental policies. Particular department, not the internal audit department. Internal audit department doesn't design, draft or implement. It is the manager within the department. C. Okay. Next. According to the COSO ERM framework, which of the following best describes the difference between strategy and business objective? We have the meaning of strategy and business objective from our normal life, but there are some specific way the word strategy and objectives have been discussed in your ERM framework. Let us see exactly how they have been discussed. See guys, business objectives are the steps taken to achieve the strategy. And what is strategy? Strategy communicates how the organization will achieve its mission and vision and apply its core values. So strategy communicates how an organization will achieve what it wants to achieve and how it will apply its core value. And business objectives are the steps to achieve the strategy. That's the question. So according to COSO framework, which of the following best describes the difference between strategy and business objective? Strategy is the plan to achieve business objective. No, business objectives are the steps to achieve the strategy. Business objectives are the steps to achieve a strategy. This is explicitly written in the ERM framework and it has to be accepted as it is. It's not law that we must follow it word by word, but at least this is how strategy and business objectives are related in the ERM framework. Next, question number 28. According to the COSO ERM framework, the characteristic of risk that reflects its nature and scope. First of all, let us discuss these one by one. Severity, to what extent a risk can damage a business. This is called severity. Velocity is the speed with which a risk can affect an organization. Like interest rate risk, if a 3 months SCIBOR, it will affect you in 3 months. If it's stock price volatility, it might affect you in the next second. So velocity is the speed with which an event can affect an organization. Persistence. Persistence is the duration for which jab tak aapke sar azab rahega. Mean a certain risk has occurred and for how long will it stay with you? This is persistence. Right? So velocity is the speed at which a risk affects the entity. Persistent is how long a risk affects an entity, including the time it takes the entity to recover. Severity, how deeply you are hit. And finally, what is complexity? It is the nature of the scope of risk. Nature, what is the nature of the risk and what are the areas that are affected? Like if the interest rate goes up, how would it affect and which areas of the business will be affected? This is called complexity of the risk. The nature of the risk and the scope, where and how you would be affected by that risk. So it means it was D. Question number 29. According to COSO, which of the following has day-to-day responsibility for ERM? Management. Who oversees board of directors? Because they are the ultimate responsible for governance and risk management. So for day-to-day, management is responsible for risk management. Next, question 30th. Elements of project risk identification includes which of the following? Elements of project risk identification includes which of the following? We have to go back to the slides to exactly pinpoint the correct answer. So basically we can do it from right here. Elements of project risk identification include which of the following? Which of these is a way to identify risk? Cost estimate is how much it will cost us to take a certain risk response. Actual risk events, interviews and observations. This is one of the ways to identify what are the risks we are facing. Observe, interview the people affected. Question number 31. Which statement below best indicates the order of risk components that should be implemented in a new ERM program? A. Control risk. That comes later, but first we have to set the risk management strategy and objective. Incorrect. Communicate and monitor risk. Again, the order should start something from that we have to first set some risk management strategy and objective, then we identify the risk, then we assess risk, then we select a suitable risk response. So this is first step, set risk management strategy and objective, and then the later procedures come after that. So that means D is the right option. Moving on to the next question. A company wants to be best in class in terms of enterprise risk management implementation. To achieve this goal, the company plans to identify events that affects the implementation of strategy and achievement of objectives. So we want to be the best in the class and we want to implement ERM. Which of the following best reflects an analysis that would help its identification process? A. Review of accidents and operational measures. We are just in the first stage. Which of the following best reflects an analysis that would help its identification process? So basically, event identification involves identifying potential events from internal or external sources. So just a review of accidents may help the company identify risk and opportunities. However, a review of operational measures would not help the company in identifying these measures. We want to identify the measures. So that's why A is incorrect. Analysis of default histories and dispersions means some historical events that have occurred and their deviations. The historical records of the events that have occurred. So these are the events that have already occurred. Actually, what we want identification of events that might occur. Yes, history can help, but analysis of the events that have already occurred, it would not help the company to identify potential opportunities and risks. What has happened is a good guide, but it is not always a source of information about the potential future events. This analysis is not a source of events that affect the achievement of the company's objectives, so it means that B is not the correct option. See, summary of driving records and age. Again, it has historical perspective. It's past events that have already occurred. So summary of driving records and age would not allow the company to identify potential opportunities and risk. That's the main agenda. We want to identify potential opportunities and risk. And the past data, the past record is not always the source. Review of incidents and new market conditions. Clearly, this is something that serves as a basis of identifying potential opportunities and risk for the organization. Moving on to the next question. ERM is closely aligned with corporate governance because it focuses management's attention on the risk mitigated, risks that have been reduced. So why would we be focusing only on those risks that have been mitigated? In fact, we need to look upon those risks area that have not been mitigated, not just those that have already been mitigated. Incorrect option. B. Identifies which of the organization's objectives is at greatest risk. Exactly. That's the ERM's core purpose. ERM recognizes risk management process for the whole organization. So it identifies and responds to the organization's greatest risk. Managing the risk of an organization is one of the goals of corporate governance. So we don't need to go any further. This is the right option. C. Reduces the level of acceptable risk to be taken. ERM does not by itself bring down the level of acceptable risk, but it just lowers the biggest risk the organization faces. Incorrect. D. Identifies and isolates the silos, the compartments or the groupings of risk in which risk exists. ERM does not separate risk. It simply assesses the risk and responds to them. Question 24. All of the following are key components of COSO framework, enterprise risk management, except moving in the reverse order. Objective setting. Yes, objective setting should always be there whenever ERM is to be implemented in an organization because it identifies potential events affecting the achievements of the organizational objective. In reverse order C, we are looking for the one that is not a part of COSO framework, not a key component. Risk assessment, yes. COSO identify risks. COSO analyze risk in order to form a basis for determining how they should be managed. Risk response, yes. Risk responses are selected, like we have 5 risk responses: accept, avoid, share, exploit, reduce, or mitigate. So which response in the given scenario is suitable is a part of COSO framework. So B, C, D are the key components of COSO framework. Accept, risk retention. Risk retention is one of the responses, which is also called risk acceptance or self-insurance. So risk retention basically is one of the responses that we can take against risk. It's not a step in or a key component of risk management process itself. That's why A is the correct option, and that completes your enterprise risk management framework.